Zimbabwe's President Emmerson Mnangagwa says that the country will need to rely on assistance from its SADC neighbours in addressing power shortages. Zimbabwe is only producing 605 megawatts of electricity against a peak demand of over 2,000 megawatts. Now, the power shortage has been worsened by limited production of electricity from the Kariba hydro power plant as a result of plunging water levels.
Mnangagwa announced plans to engage countries in the SADC region on the export of excess power, a short-term measure meant to meet the electricity shortfall until April next year. Poor management and low investment are being blamed for Zimbabwe's energy woes. With an installed capacity of 920 megawatts, Hwange Thermal Power Station was only generating 301 megawatts on Monday morning, a result of frequent breakdowns and coal stockouts. Authorities say $310 million has been secured for the refurbishment and replacement of generators. However, the Zimbabwe Electricity Supply Authority says it has a $2 billion infrastructure gap. Climate change has also affected energy generation, with production at the Kariba Dam limited to 300 of a possible 1,050 megawatts of generation due to low water levels. Mnangagwa says the reneging of large economies on commitments to end thermal power is a lesson that Zimbabwe cannot be sentimental about coal while its industries die from power outages. He has called for the optimization of Zimbabwe's licensing regime to speed up the entry of new players into the energy sector. A new 300-megawatt plant is expected to be synchronized to the grid by the end of the year. Authorities say this will only make a small dent in demand, with 2,350 megawatts in new connections applied for, primarily from the mining sector.
For some analysis, we're now joined by Dr. Brian Sedze, who's the Director of a Free Enterprise Initiative in Zimbabwe. Dr. Sedze, always good to talk to you. Thanks so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you, viewers. It's great to be here.
We're told that at times Zimbabwe could have load shedding lasting as much as 18 hours. How did things get this bad?
Peter, I'm speaking from Harare. I've been on load shedding for over 24 hours. So it depends on where you are, but basically we're living in an era or in a time where electricity is almost like a ghost, appears at 10 p.m. in the evening and goes away at about 3 a.m. in the morning. It's pretty bad for industries, pretty bad for homes. Nothing is moving. Industries are not working, and commerce is also not moving that much. But maybe you would want to understand that most of Southern Africa, Peter, hasn't done very well post-colonial Africa. And this has impacted on energy and everything else, like currency. It has impacted on healthcare. It has impacted on everything. I'll just give you a brief that, you know, in Zimbabwe, our major power plant is Kariba, which was installed in 1955, and Hwange in 1973. And in Mozambique, it is Hydro Cabora Bassa, which was installed around 1974. In Zambia also uses Kariba, which is 1955. South Africa is in the same scenario. Namibia also gets power, used to get power from Zimbabwe, from Hwange. So we haven't invested much in power generation. So we are reaping the sordid side of lack of investment in power generation in Africa, especially Southern Africa, where population was growing, and with growing population, there's demand of products and services. With demand of products and services, there is need for new industries. And this is just a general brief of what happens. But if you look at it, it's just short term, because on average, if you look at Zimbabwe, the electricity availability in the whole country is less than 40%. If you look at DRC, it's less than 19%. If you look at Zambia, it's less than 30%. If you look at Mozambique, it's less than 30%. So the demand of electricity is not going to slow down because of the need to be on a communication networks, the need to modernize the rural to urban migration, and the modernization of our rural areas. So our electricity challenges are not going to go anytime soon. When we come to Zimbabwe, one of the major aspects that has been impacting on us was the pseudo-socialism that was pursued from 1980 up until 2018, where the cost of production of electricity was way above what the government determined as what the consumer must get. So consumers were getting electricity far below the cost. When that happens, you don't have capacity to grow, to do capital investment. And number two, you cannot walk into a bank, you cannot walk into an international finance institution, you cannot walk into a regional financial institution and say, I want as an energy company to develop a new plant, whether hydroelectric, whether solar, and then you're going to sell it below cost. So that pseudo-socialism has been with us because we were pursuing inclusivity in access to electricity. We were pursuing popularism. So in the end, from 1980 to 2018, each and every day a person was consuming electricity in Zimbabwe. He was doing it at a cost of the government, which was not paying for it. So it was a hole which was being dug each and every day for 38 years. So you can imagine the impact of that in the availability of electricity. And one of the major aspects is that we only repair things, we only maintain things when things have stopped working. So the infrastructure from 1980 is dilapidated.
Right.
It has got a lot of downfalls.
Okay.
It does not work.
All right. So we're talking, I mean, if I'm reading between the lines, we have a long period of mismanagement, lack of investment, and lack of repairs and maintenance over a prolonged period of time. How have the authorities been able to explain this? Because when we look at Zimbabwe, this is a country with a small population, 12 million people. And that's nothing compared to the minerals that the country is exporting every single year. So the question then becomes, is it just mismanagement? What is going wrong?
Peter, one of our major challenges in this country is the governance of our state enterprises. It is also the general governance of the country. We're lucky to have a lot of minerals. We're lucky to have good soil. We're lucky to have all those things that any country can. I mean, Julius Nyerere said, Robert Mugabe, you have inherited a jewel of Africa. At that particular point in 1980, we were possibly the second biggest economy in Africa. What has happened, Peter, is that we have not prioritized anything that does not go to our cronies. We have not prioritized things that do not go to our tribal clansmen. We have not prioritized on investing locally. Up until sanctions came in 2002, each and every person was investing in Switzerland, in the United Kingdom, in Ireland. Resources were plundered, Peter. And as of now, despite all the resources that we have in this country, the priorities are just wrong. Priorities for this country, if it has to grow, have to go to energy. Our priorities got to go to social services like healthcare, but that is just not happening. We lose billions of dollars in smuggling. We lose billions of dollars in corruption. We lose billions of dollars in unaccounted for tax. We lose billions of dollars. If you just look at the Auditor General's reports for the past 10 years, it will point to you to more than $30 billion, which is unaccounted for in just 10 to 15 years. So there is no excess resources to invest in energy because we're putting money where we do not grow the economy. And this economy needs energy for it to grow.
So Zimbabwe is, according to the president, is looking to neighboring SADC states for assistance. But what this sounds like is more debt that Zimbabwe won't be able to pay.
Peter, I would just say there's no debt that's going to be acquired because Zimbabwe has got a very bad record in terms of paying its debts. So no one is going to give us electricity. Zambia says we've got to pay it upfront. They don't have electricity at the moment. Hydrocarbura Bassa, which was then owned by Portugal and Mozambique, they can't give us electricity until we pay upfront. Namibia, there is no electricity because they've been obtaining electricity after upgrading our Hwange power station. South Africa is also in a similar quagmire. So there is no debt accumulation. We are just going to be in darkness because no one trusts the Zimbabwean government to honor up its debts. At least now, it may, countries may start believing in us, but they're not believing in us now. So no one is going to give us electricity until we show them the money.
In the meantime, what does this mean for life for Zimbabweans? If you don't have solar panels, if you don't have access to generators, what happens?
We are in the midst of a World Cup, Peter. I can assure you 90% of households are not watching it. It is only the affluent suburbs that are watching it. People are cooking using all sorts of unbelievable sources of energy in an urban environment, like firewood, like coal. People are using gas. Children are not able to do their homework. People are not able to work on their computers. When you go to a workplace, you're not also able to use your computer. You're not able to manufacture anything because you need energy to do that. The country basically is on a mini standstill. It is just denial that people are going to work, but people are not working. So it's a big challenge that Zimbabwe faces because without energy, which they promise in the first quarter of 2023, up until then, we are not working. We are basically, if you're in Harare, if you're in Bulawayo, if you're in Mutare, you are basically a rural area that is in an urban area.
All right, Dr. Sedze, we're going to have to leave it there and let's just see what happens. But it does seem this is unsustainable and something will have to give sooner rather than later. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much, Peter.
Thank you. All right, that's Dr. Brian Sedze, Director of Free Enterprise Initiative in Zimbabwe. And he says in the area that he's in Harare, they've been load shedding for 24 hours now. No power. 650 watts is what the country is able to generate, and during peak they need over 2,000 megawatts. So it's a third of the country's requirement, and it just seems to be getting worse.